Fantastic. All right. We may as well get going. It seems like everyone's here. What a big turnout today. Welcome to Splice Low-Res. This is our second kind of session that we've done. The last one was about 3 weeks ago. This is our attempt to try to bring together the community that we care so deeply about, especially in a time of COVID. We feel the need that that we need to have more conversations about where media is going, and we wanted to take this as an opportunity to get everyone together. Let me just flip this around. Rashad?
Yeah. I just, I feel like some of you know us and some of you don't. So I think it's fair to introduce ourselves quickly. We're Alan and Rashad. That was Alan. I'm the Rashad part of that team. Alan and I run Splice from Singapore to support media transformation in Asia. And I think it's fair to say it feels especially important to do that now, of all times. That's us. Yeah, that's a quick thing about us, but yeah.
So on this second edition of Low-Res, we have over 120 registered attendees. If you look at the names on this slide here, that's pretty phenomenal. We're really proud of the community that we're part of, and the fact that we've had so many exciting people come through the doors here in the last 2 minutes or so, and just recognizing so many great names that are out there. So thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. Very quickly around the ground rules, we're keeping this as simple as possible. Number one, if you're going to tweet, and we would encourage that, please use the Splice Low-Res hashtag. Also, live tweet our speakers. You can find their links on the website. If you look at the Splice Low-Res website, you'll find it there. If you're speaking, we would encourage you to use headphones and microphones just to keep the sound tolerable. Find a quiet room. Find a room that has good light. Use the chat box as often as you want to. Leave comments there. Leave questions in there as well. And perhaps most importantly, when you are not speaking, please put yourself on mute. That will keep the line clean for everybody else. At the end of all of this, so right now we're recording this. So at the end of all this will be edited and put into our YouTube channel. So expect to see yourselves there. If you don't want to see yourself there, make sure first of all you don't speak, and also just leave us a note later on as well if you don't want to appear in the video. And of course, be kind and be generous. This is all very stressful times that we're living in. So let's, this is a no judgment zone. We're all here to learn from each other.
Yeah, as Alan was saying, this is going to be recorded. We'll send you the link to the YouTube channel right after this. We'll pop it in the chat box, but we're also sending around an email to all the attendees shortly after. Feel free to exchange email addresses. Feel free to get in touch. Connect to speakers, connect to us. We'll also send around a quick feedback form in the email. We'd love to know how you feel. We'd love honest feedback. Tell us where we sucked. Tell us what you loved. It's all really useful. Send us ideas for the next Splice Low-Res, and hey, please tweet anytime you like.
Cool. One quick mention about our Lights On survey. This is something that some of you have seen and some of you have already submitted for this survey. Our goal with Lights On is to figure out exactly what the state of media is around the world. We know that this is a very difficult time for many around, especially with regard to finances. So we've sent a survey around to get a few ideas or about where the pain points are so that we can help inform the community better about what's coming up and what needs to be done or could be done. So we would love to have your your voice in there. The link is in the chat and email that you'll get at the end of today's session. Rashad, on the program.
Yes. Quick, we're excited about this program again. here's how the time is going. We're a tiny bit late. I'm gonna hustle this along. As you know, this is how to manage or minimize the impact of the crisis on your media business or on your newsroom. We're so lucky to have Key Kiarie and Patricia Torres-Burd from Mdif sharing their recommendations and their valuable advice. We're going to open this up to questions after they're done. Should be around 9 a.m. GMT, or if you're in Singapore or this region, 5 p.m. We're also going to jump straight into a BYOB situation after everything's done. Bring your online beverage, unless some of you hardcore people like drinking beer at 9 o'clock, 9:30 in the morning. Feel free to stick around and chat, and then we should be done in 2 hours. We will close you out with our plans going forward, some quick feedback, and again, we'll remind you about the survey. So I just want to, as we said, some of the recent recommendations that Mdif recently published is the other reason we wanted to do this low-res. Alan will throw the link into the chat box right now. Read through that Mdif story. We absolutely love it. There's some hardcore, solid advice in there. We absolutely love the voice and the tone and the advice. Let's hear about those recommendations from the horse's mouth. We're happy to bring on Key Kiarie, in fact, board of Mdif. Key is their Chief Investment Officer. Pat is their Managing Director of Media Services. Key, thank you so much for being with us at this unearthly hour. I know it's crazy o'clock where you are. It's very kind of you to wake up this early. Pat, Key, all yours, please.
Well, good morning, Key, and good morning, everybody. I'll just say thank you for having us. And I agree, Key is a trooper for getting up, and it's 4 a.m. in New York where he's at. So Key, I don't see you, but I hope you're there.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we see you. Oh, look at you, all ready to go. Alan, let me know when it's a good time for us to start sharing the presentation. But
yep, go ahead and press present now. It's all yours.
Thank you. So the way that we're going to do this, though, that we've planned is I will start. Let me know if you can see it. We tested it a little bit ago, but it took a second. Can you see it?
Yep, it's there.
Yes. Fantastic. Fantastic. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit of background on Mdif, because I'm sure a lot of you that don't know who Mdif is, although in this chat, I'm seeing so many friends and people that we work with and a lot of people that I know very well. So it's lovely to be here. On behalf of Key and myself, I want to say thank you for inviting us to a conversation that we think is very, very important. And by no means do we at Mdif assume that we are the experts in everything. One of the reasons that we worked as a team to put out those recommendations, most of which are driven by Key's expertise, are the fact that Mdif has been around for over 24 years. And in those 24 years, it has seen its share of crises that have come and gone. It has supported media organizations in war zones. It's supported media organizations that have been attacked, both politically and economically. And so the recommendations are based also on years of expertise of the management team that come together and say, this is what you need to do. And before this call started, Sunny was telling us what he had done with his team, which I think is brilliant in terms of some of the things we're going to discuss. And I'm eager to hear from Sunny later. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing my presentation move. Can you see it move? Oh, here we go. There we go. There. Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties already. So what does Mdif do? We're a traditional investment fund that provides capital. We do it either through debt or equity, but our mission is unique in that we support independent media throughout the world. Our big mission is to make sure that free press is available to those around the world, because we believe that editorial independence is crucial to the democratic process. So we work with companies. Many of yourselves are people that are out there in the front lines, and are doing really innovative work in terms of engaging with your audiences and in terms of connecting with them. And currently, the work that you're doing for us is so important because it can and it will save lives. And I believe there's probably never been a more important time to be able to provide that independent information to the people that need it most. We were founded in 1996. We currently have over $203 million that we've invested around the world. I work for Media Advisory Services, which is a department that is funded through a special grant that allows us to provide technical assistance and grants. So all of the projects that are in our pipeline and our clients are eligible to receive technical assistance. I won't go into too much detail, but it's a variety of things, such as we were planning to take a very large group, I think it was close to 38 people, to Splice in Chiang Mai, which we're hoping will still happen at the end of this year. But those are the types of things that we do, and that technical assistance is provided at no cost to our clients. We currently serve over 119 clients in 42 countries around the world. MDIF has 42 employees that are based globally. We have our head offices in New York, where Key is. I'm based in Prague, and we also have offices. Mohammed is our deputy CEO. He's on this call. He's based in Johannesburg. We have offices in Kuala Lumpur, in Mumbai, in Jakarta, Indonesia as well. We also, to cover this great part of the world, we have investment officers that work with regional directors. And so we have Kevin Brocklin on this call with as an investment officer. We also have Kirill. I'm sure other people are on the call. Kirill is a program director for South Asia, and Kevin works in Southeast Asia and South Asia as well as an investment officer. The reason that we do what we do is that we believe that there's a real challenge out there being able to get capital. And especially if you're in independent media, it's very difficult to be able to compete with major conglomerates that currently in the digital space have so many more tools and are able to not only gain new audiences, but most importantly also, increase their revenue. So MDIF's solution is, as I mentioned before, very mission driven. The reason that I mentioned independent media is we don't work, for example, with a national broadcaster. We also don't work with an independent media, or we're not able to work with an independent media that is funded through a big conglomerate. And that does not imply that MDIF thinks either one of those is terrible. It just implies that it's not part of our mission. And so our focus is independent media in order to provide them either debt or equity financing that Key can explain a little bit more. One of the things that I think is important, and I mentioned briefly at the beginning of this call, is that we're not the experts in everything, but because we work with all these media, we feel very honored and humbled by the fact that we're learning from them. We're constantly learning from them as to what they're doing. And we recently had a call with 65 people in a crisis management call talking about exactly what they're going through as they face this crisis. We also had invited guests from Spain and from Italy who are in complete lockdown, and that we can learn from them as to what they're seeing. Not unique to MDIF clients, not unique to MDIF. The world is seeing collapsing revenues in terms of media. I'm sure all of you have seen your budget revenues for advertising either completely dry up or be very, very limited. Any events business, Splice Beta, we're so sorry, was canceled, but have really come to a standstill, and it will be determined what the future holds in that area. And Sunny mentioned earlier before the call started that he stopped printing. We're seeing a lot of other people stopping their press circulation or highly decreasing it for obvious reasons. A lot of what we're going to talk about is what's happening, to the media organizations outside of the media organizations in terms of how you cover and the revenue that can come in. But this is really posing internal crisis. Some of you on this call are managers, some of you on this call are not managers. And I think this conversation is as important for both sides, because working and managing a virtual organization is very complicated and poses its own set of different obstacles. Those of you that are out there reporting, it's really complicated to be safe and to still go out and reporting the same way you did, or trying to find new ways to do so. How do you protect your staff and yourself? that you then don't come back and be exposed and God forbid, and infect your families. And, you know, unfortunately, we've talked to some projects, one specific, it's not a client of ours, who shared with us that as much as 1/3 of their staff became ill. And so that really poses a great pressure on those that have to step up to the plate and cover for the rest that are feeling terrible and really cannot work. And last but not least, as we all know, this is a great opportunity for those who love to politicize crisis, those that use misinformation to politicize, but also drive censorship to journalism. And so these are the things that we're seeing around the world that we believe are part of today's conversation, but also critical that everybody understands that this is not only happening to you, but it's a global crisis. So I'm now going to hand it over to Key Kiarie. Will run the slides from here, who will talk to what we're doing at MDIF to help our clients.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak with each of you or all of you at the same time. It is about 4:22 in New York, and to get me out of bed at this hour must mean that I'm really excited to spend some time with you guys. So I am in New York. It's the new epicenter, I believe, of, well, very much our country. Some might argue our world, but what we're experiencing here, I know, is being experienced everywhere from the smallest village to the largest city. This virus doesn't discriminate against anyone. From my perspective, when we were sitting around beginning to plan around this for the last month or so, we came together very quickly and said, what can we do to help our clients be in a position to survive as well as sustain through this difficult crisis? We didn't use hope.
Key, I think you've muted yourself. You might want to unmute yourself there. Okay, I think you're good.
Okay, sorry about that. Can you guys, should I start again?
We only missed, I think, about last 10 seconds of it. So,
Okay, no problem. What I was saying was that when we got together about a month ago and saw that this pandemic was beginning to make its way across the globe, we quickly decided to put together a number of strategies and observations based on knowledge, experience, and case studies as to how to manage through a crisis. This is the first global crisis that I'm living through, and I'm sure most of the people on this call are living through. As Patricia mentioned, there are multiple countries and clients that we've had that have been through very difficult crises, whether they were wars, whether they were epidemics or famines and government attacks. But from our perspective, this is one that we're all sharing in together. And we decided to put down that knowledge as quickly as possible in a memo that allowed people to really understand that these are actions, these are strategies that you need to take into account today. And those that were able to move the fastest would be better positioned to protect their businesses and survive this crisis. Patricia, we can go to the next slide. This quote, "A crisis will magnify any problems you already have within your organization," is clear. When you have an organization that is built on efficiency, that's built with a phenomenal team, and that's able to really move very quickly through day-to-day operations, you'll understand that managing through this crisis allows you to be better positioned. But when the crisis begins, issues that you've identified or things that you wanted to change or business initiatives that you wanted to execute in order to better your organization are now really showing or magnifying themselves throughout this crisis. But that's okay. We will learn from this crisis. We'll take the opportunity to improve. We'll take the opportunity to strengthen our businesses, and that will sharpen our operating plan. So when we come out of this crisis, I truly believe that most organizations that are able to survive will have learned and will continue to employ much of the tactics that they were able to employ during the crisis in their everyday businesses going forward. So first and foremost, build and manage your cash reserves. What we recommended is that if you had accounts receivable outstanding, grab them as quickly as possible. That was for those that were able to move as quickly as possible, that were able to see this coming, and was able to offer different deals or to accelerate accounts receivable. As you'll see, many businesses are doing exactly what we're advising you to do, which is to conserve cash. If you have accounts receivable, stretch them. Try to get them. If you have accounts payable, try to stretch them. Things that you can pay later in order to maintain cash, to protect the core aspects or core cost components of your business in order to continue it running. You want to keep as much cash as possible. Your business models are completely dislocated. You're going to find yourself in positions where what you were doing every day, things that were expected in terms of revenue, expected in terms of different initiatives that you were planning, whether it was a large event, whether it was a special edition, whether it was an investigative report, you will likely have postponed those or not doing them right now. Everything that's news oriented is 99% focused around this virus and the stories that are around this virus. And I'm pretty certain that most business plans when the year started did not have virus in their initial projections for the year. So rigorous cash flow management is critical. So what we told people in order for them to get a very clear understanding of what to expect is that take your first month, take your revenues and go through it line by line and make revenue reductions. You have to look at your business and you have to look at what the downside will be. This is to make it a realistic projection for you to understand how you need to manage your company. Drastic cuts in terms of your revenue projections. In the first month, some of our companies have seen a 60 to 70% reduction in April for revenue forecasts. And many of these companies were very healthy, had a very deep bench of advertisers, had a long subscription history, but they're still seeing 60 to 70% cuts in their revenue. Why is that? Because all through the chain of people that we're servicing as media companies are making reductions. You're seeing it from the advertising houses. It's as if they got the first page of this presentation, let's conserve cash. So they're holding back their own cash flow in order to make sure their businesses are strong. Even if you bring it down to the individual subscriber or the individual viewer, they're going through their expenses if they've been laid off, if they found that their primary revenue generating entity in their own homes. They sit around the table and let's say, what can we do in order to maintain cash and provide basic needs in our home? So we're seeing this come all the way up through the revenue forecast. Now, it's not all bad. At some point, we're not going to be down 60 or 70%, depending on the business you're operating, whether it's TV, radio, digital print. There are opportunities to see that come back as we reach the summer months. We believe that 60 to 70% reduction by July and August could be closer to 50%. Obviously, this will be indexed to the pandemic and how the pandemic and the curves begin to flatten, how quickly economies are able to get to work. But this won't be this isn't a short blip. This isn't 3 months. This isn't a month. This will be an impact where if you want to get a clear understanding as to how you're going to have to manage your costs, you have to reduce revenues and create different forecast scenarios where you can see up to 18 months, 24 months until you're able to get back up to status quo. An aggressive scenario is a blanket revenue reduction of 50% over 18 months. It might not be the worst case for some of our companies. Those that are tied to a few core advertisers that are really connected to media houses that have seen a pretty aggressive subscription fall, you can see this continue for a while longer. But it is very healthy for you to take a worst case scenario or a very critical scenario and view what that could look like for your business. Getting buy-in from your management team is critical. You need to go through your executive leadership team and make sure that everyone understands that we are, for lack of a better analogy, in a wartime scenario. All of your generals, all your lieutenants have to be signed in that all the special projects, all the special add-ons that they wanted in order to make their productions or make their artwork stronger, they need to understand that they have to cut back. And for all the CEOs and for all the editors here, I really implore you to go to your chief financial officer or your head of finance and make them a critical partner if they are already not a critical partner. They need to be the person in the organization that can tell you no. Even if you're the CEO or the leadership or the founder, you need to strengthen more than ever the chief financial officer to be able to tell you that no, you cannot do this. No, you have to take a break. No, you have to delay. Their job, and primarily their job, is to make sure that the lights continue to stay on. Go to your CFO, give them additional strength, have them looking at the micro cases of every single project you want to do, every single bottle of water you want to buy, and give them the strength to analyze and come back and say, you need to make cuts here, or I see that in 6 months, A, B, or C will happen. Immediate cost-cutting measures are important, and that goes back to your CFO or your financial planner. Make sure that they're able to come up to speed and write a report that says, I need to see the reductions that match the revenues that we're forecasting in our downside case. What will this look like? This is going to not be comfortable at all. This is going to be incredibly painful, and it's going to be something that you are going to want to do with that executive leadership team and try the best way of getting to a cost reduction strategy for survival. If you're expecting a 30% reduction in revenue and your margins are already tight, you're going to have to find a way to cut those costs or get that cash flow inside your business in order to continue running. The hard fact about this is that we're talking about long-term survival for your businesses. We want your businesses to maintain a future and have a path to get through this difficult situation. And if you decide not to cut costs, you'll find that survival will be, your probability of survival will be reduced. We saw this through the financial crisis. We saw this through different case studies where either war or any sort of dislocation in the political environment or the economy, those that were able to cut costs quickly were able to survive and have a higher survival rate. So very clear, many of the people that you hire, you love. They're your friends, some of them are your family, some of them have dedicated a good part of their lives to your organization, your company, and to whatever focus they are for journalism. Staff reductions or reductions in salary, they're going to be required. I look at this from the humanity point of view, that doing the best that you can to protect your people, keep on as many people as possible, but getting buy-in below the executive leadership team that this is the message that we need to make these cuts in order to find a brighter day is going to be critical. Most of the cost bars that we see in our portfolio companies, people, staff is the biggest percentage, and it is the most difficult place to make reductions. So this is where you're going to have to find areas of reduction so that you can reduce that cost bar. We've already talked a bit about managing accounts receivable. Obviously, we're now a number of weeks into the crisis. If you were able to do this, congratulations, you were able to negotiate some deals. Someone that owed you $1, maybe you said, I'll let you pay me with 80 cents. I still encourage that you do that. I still encourage that you find opportunities to bring in whatever capital is owed to you as best as you possibly can. Maintaining productivity. This is where I think that cost reduction strategies that you employ now will potentially be embraced into the future. You'll find that you're able to do a lot more with a lot less because you have to. That's what's going to be clear, that instead of having 4 or 5 cameramen, a script writer, or any other costs that are needed to create and present your work, you might find that you're able to do it with less, and you might decide that that's going to be the way that you'll go forward. But the best cost reduction strategies in order to move your business forward through this crisis will be critical. So designing and implementing an internal crisis workflow for staff and coverage, you want to see the best way to seek opportunities for your current audience. What does your audience need that is presented in this current crisis? Coronavirus is important, but many of you have audiences that are dedicated, that are loyal, and that are looking to you for pure journalism, facts that are going to maintain your integrity. And it's going to be critical that you find opportunities to maintain those audiences and understand what they need. And that's the same for your clients. Advertisers that are looking for the platform that they can either sell products that will benefit this audience through the crisis, or that are trying to send a message of encouragement in order to fulfill advertising time or to reach a specific audience in a long-term strategy they might have. Talk to your clients, despite the fact that they may or may not be advertising at this time. Try to get to understand how they could potentially be a partner in the future, while at the same time serving your audience. It's going to be critical that you don't let your financial records fall by the wayside during this crisis. Maintaining your financial records, maintaining core accounting is going to be very important as you move forward through this crisis, because at some point we have to count the dollars and we have to make sure that we'll be able to do the proper reporting, particularly if you're going to be looking for government aid, particularly if you're going to be looking for any support from any NGOs or any other opportunities out there to bring in cash in this critical situation. Prioritize context over being first. So write your stories, make sure that you're able to deliver clarity to your audience. What we're seeing across the globe is that those that are able to provide strong journalism, core facts, they're not compromising on rumors or compromising on political messages that may or may not make sense, are those that are still maintaining a very strong audience and that are maintaining the type of eyeballs that they require in order to even establish a new reputation for themselves. I think that many people will find resources that have been very important to them in this crisis and that they'll use as a beacon for knowledge as they look to navigate through this difficult situation. You can be that beacon, and the dividends will pay off at a later time. We can move to the next slide. Content remains king. Actually, I think, Patricia, we might be off, but your work can save lives, which is also goes to the point of just being able to provide data that's useful to your audience. And then content remains king. Know your purpose. Don't chase or don't try to become something that you're not, because it could be, this isn't the time to take drastic jumps or take large risks. Every risk that you take, and this goes throughout your business planning and navigating any opportunities that you might see with regards to managing this crisis, make sure that it's a calculated risk. Know what variables need to happen or what the variables need to be in order for you to be successful. If any of those variables are too large and require too much of a chance, this is going back to hope, then you should not be taking that risk. Calculated risks are going to be important, and you want to focus on your core audience, being able to provide them with information and data that's going to make them survive this quarantine and survive, in most cases, any social distancing. One of my favorite quotes right now is that social distancing doesn't mean that you have to be distant, that you can continue to make a connection. If there's anything that everyone on this call is good at, is making a connection. So keep that in mind, that as daily life adapts and that people are unable to go beyond the borders of their homes, and in some cases the borders of their world, that this is something that you're incredibly good at, and your content is going to be remembered, and this is the opportunity to continue a connection with your audience. So audience listening has never been more important. The focus, the prioritization, the engagement in the community. This is a bit of a summary of what we've been talking about throughout this presentation. Your audience needs to be listening, and you need to have strategic discipline in terms of what you're going to present to them. Trust is a priority, and your editors and your writers should not be compromised. Make sure that you have the technical capacity to deliver what you require to deliver. Your job is to keep the signal running at the lowest cost possible. But at some point, you're going to have to make choices in order to continue to deliver to your audience and make sure that you're able to deliver priority news that is editorial legitimate. Make sure that you're able to engage, respond to your viewers. We all have COVID fatigue. I don't watch our local news. I know I can see what's happening around us. To the extent that you're able to find those good stories, that you're able to reorient or provide a tangible or tangential connection that's not fully COVID, that can go a long way. It's very difficult. We don't have sports. We don't have the same type of the word I'm looking for is distractions that we're used to or the distractions that we're able to keep us off of everyday life, because everyday life is COVID. But it is important to try to find those elements that are not completely disconnected, but are going to give you the ability to connect with your audience. Organize communities, be able to be that central location, particularly if you find a niche, particularly if you are a niche, but also be a resource. It's going to be incredibly important that you continue to maintain discipline in terms of pure information. Right now, everything we say and everything we do is remembered. No one deletes anything. So being a critical resource that is true and provides data that's going to save lives and keep people where they need to be in this crisis will be important. So tapping into your network of experts. So we're one of them. We have over 50 portfolio relationships that we are providing this knowledge to, but you also have local relationships. You have those that are in your networks, that are in your companies, that have been advisors that can offer you advice, that can offer you insights. Take all of that knowledge, and as leaders, disseminate that knowledge and find what works best for you. Understand who your partnerships are. Some of your most critical competitors, your most fierce competitors might be a partnership in these tough situations. The white flag can go up, and you can find opportunities to work with those that have been difficult in the past, and maybe you can find common ground to being able to navigate through this crisis. There is strength in numbers. So to the extent that there are partnerships that you can find on the cost side, and particularly on the revenue side, take those into account. Find alliances, those that can find credible health organizations, that can find data generators, can help deliver or create a new way of people understanding what you're presenting, can go an incredibly long way. So from my perspective, there is opportunity here for partnerships, and there is opportunity here for being able to reduce your costs and potentially create revenue opportunities. When I think about revenue opportunities, because I believe it's important, some of our most sophisticated managers on the sales side, they are very clear that they're not going to meet their numbers for April or May, but they are negotiating for December right now. They are saying that, I know that you said you were going to do a spring campaign, but let's move 65–70% of that spring campaign to another to our Christmas or holiday or end of the year campaign. Consider ways of finding long-term sales opportunities while being realistic about what's in front of you for the next 2 or 3 months. And from my perspective, there is a saying that in crisis, there's always the eventual chance for opportunity. And when we're going through this, your minds will be running, your notes will be long, your whiteboards will be full, and you're going to find different business models or different opportunities which you'll scratch out in red pen, or those you'll circle and say, I believe we can do this. And I believe we can do this because it's data-driven. We've thought through the analysis. We thought through what we need to do in order to be successful here. Be ready to pivot. Be ready to embrace creative opportunities, particularly around educating or bringing people up to speed around this health crisis. Data is incredibly important. I'm a big fan of data. I'm a big fan of how people are able to cut data so that everyone can understand it and that they're able to really make decisions on it. Consider how best you can use data and where your sources of data come from. This is an incredible time to find a new audience. Many people that will, many subscribers or many audience members that used to go to a different source for information are realizing that source of information was not what they need to survive. It's what they needed to be entertained. It's what they needed to reinforce their own views. This is an opportunity that if you're producing core journalism that's providing facts, it can lead to new audiences. And how you present that journalism in the creative ways, or whether it's with data, can go an incredibly long way. And once you acquire those audiences or you're able to get them on your hook, find the best way to keep them involved and keep them engaged. And then plan for the long-term relationships. I mentioned that some of our sales executives are able to start thinking about the future. They're trying to shift dollars. Think about how you can work with your cost bar, whether it's a landlord or whether it's print or whether it's some other utilization that you require. Try to negotiate deals so that you can survive through this crisis. But what's most important is that as leaders and as members of the team, that you keep a very good head on your shoulders. There will be bad days. There'll be days where you're shaken to your core, but good days are going to come. And celebrate the small victories. Get excited about the new blips on your Google traffic. Get excited about the extent someone spent on an article. Learn from the data that you're getting from those articles, but have that positive impact that we will survive through this. But it's critical that even when you're having that positivity, hope is not a strategy. We truly believe that many of the directions that we've provided in this presentation are long-term tools to navigate through a war crisis. And it's a different type of war, but this is going to be important to get through this difficult situation. And it is okay to apologize when the situation is over. If you didn't pay someone and you were able to survive, make it up to them at a later date. Don't forget those that helped you survive and get you through this crisis, because those relationships will go a long way. And that, I believe, is where I'm going to pause and hand it back over to my colleague, Patricia.
Thank you, Key. I think we can all agree those were fantastic and difficult recommendations. But as Key pointed out, our goal here is to make sure that media organizations like yourselves are still around in 6 months. And it's time to really take the situation, apart from the obvious crisis that's happening outside of your newsrooms, internal economics, and what you do with them will decide your future. Transparency has always been critical for the work that everybody does in this call. And I think that we're seeing great transparency now with media organizations talking to their readers and their supporters. And only you can decide when is the right time to have that discussion with them, because you're the one that has the conversations and the relationships and the engagement with them. We are seeing fantastic examples in terms of being very transparent and saying, this is what we're doing to get through this crisis. These are the costs we're making. We know you at home are struggling as well. But these are the staff reductions, salary reductions, as Key pointed out, that we're taking across our team. This is where we're saving money. And if you can give us a little bit more money as part of your membership, or if you can provide some sort of support, this is the time to do it. And I will say that even if people don't support you financially, they might just be able to support you there in spirit, or might be able to bring something else to the table. They won't forget about this transparency and you being, as clear with them as you're being and as honest as you are about your situation, because, by the way, they're going through the same worries too. I want to share real quick to tie into that is that eldiario.es in Spain, that is not a client, but they're deep, deep friends of ours, have members they call partners, and they did exactly this. They asked people to raise their annual membership fee. And we know that Spain is in a lockdown, and we know that things are very critical there, but 85% of their members agreed to raise their fees, their annual fees, which I think is really impressive. And that has a lot to do with their conversation and their engagement. Additionally, they asked members to become their ambassadors, and they gained 7,000 new supporters in 1 week. We all know that that will begin tapering off. That's not something that they expect will continue. They probably just passed that window of opportunity, but for them, that was really a critical time. And apparently they hit the sweet spot. So I think it's important to be listening to that time as to when you can ask. And again, I'll go back to say that even if people don't give you a lot of money, they're going to really respect you for doing this. And I think as Key pointed out in his conversation was that transparency lends itself to your clients. You know, the more that you come to your clients and you say, how can we be of help? Because as Key very well pointed out, they're struggling as well. We had one example of, well, we've had several examples, but a couple of media organizations are giving free advertisement to small media enterprises. And then because they want to make sure that they don't close and shut down. One other fantastic media organization in South Africa, the Daily Maverick, is hosting a webinar that they partnered with a financial institution to talk about what this economic crisis means to small business enterprises. And they've opened it up not only to their membership, but they've opened it up to all their readers and all the small media enterprises. Think about this for just a second. Regardless of the information, and this is very important information that they're passing on, those small media enterprises, those small media and small enterprises are going to remember what Daily Maverick did for them during this crisis. And I want to say Daily Maverick is not a client of MDIF, but they are part of our South Africa Media Innovation Program. And I mention them as others on this call because we are constantly learning best examples from them. I'm having trouble, there we go. I will now go into more of an internal discussion, and that is that you and your team are not immune to this. And you really need to take some crisis considerations internally to make sure that not only financially you survive, but also the well-being of your staff. We recommend having an internal COVID crisis scenario within your staff. I think every media organization should always have a crisis scenario. Most newsrooms I've ever worked with, we've always had the worst case scenario. What happens if, you know, a leader is killed? What happens if, God forbid, an airplane goes down? If you don't have a COVID crisis emergency action plan, you should have it. And that would, of course, include, you know, staff measures, safety, does anybody get sick, etc. Do you have a continuity plan, a redundancy plan? Are there team members that are so technically responsible for a certain part of your business? What happens if they can't connect or come to work, or worse yet, get sick? Is there somebody that can be trained to help them or take over? We recommend a management tree. Make sure, you know, in these dislocated management ways of working where we're all from home, it's not always easy to get the editor's attention or the manager's attention. Who can make decisions that are, who can I text or WhatsApp that can help me make a quick decision rather than waiting for the editorial meeting that you're having tomorrow? What types of healthcare support are you providing for your staff in terms of, do they know what to do if and when they get sick? Is there a system in which one media organization that we work with had already reached out to a hospital and said, what happens if one of our staff gets sick? What do we do? They unfortunately had to take someone via an ambulance. They are fine, but they did have a plan in place, which, you know, even if you never use it, your HR, and even if you only have 4 people on your team, it's important to have it. And communication, you know, communication is key, and I mentioned the call that we had last week with all of our crisis management. Something that was also brought up, and Key mentioned this in terms of content. You want to have virus-free content for your audience when it comes to fatigue. You also want to have virus-free conversations, which, by the way, we know are really hard to not talk about this thing internally with your staff. can you talk about something else? Because that connection, that human connection is really, really important. Having a buddy system is important, having someone that can check on each other. One of our clients in India, Scroll, they're taking turns buying groceries for each other, and making sure that everybody's okay, having conversations. Another client of ours in Hungary has a rule that no one can come to work. No one can come to their desk to begin working until they've gotten fully dressed and have had breakfast away from their desk. And, he was telling us this as I was eating my breakfast during the call, thinking, oh, I'm so guilty of this. So I think it's important to have that communication. And that same client in Hungary, they've set a rule that they have this 10 o'clock meeting every day, and they spend 15 minutes talking about everything that is not COVID, that is not having to do with the crisis. Because, and I think this is really important, as this great quote from Marcin Gacicki, who is the managing director of one of our clients in Poland, Gazeta, said, "This is a marathon. It is not a sprint. We're in this for the long run." As a former journalist, I know that adrenaline. Oh my gosh, we got to cover, we got to cover, we got to cover. And you cannot do 18-hour days, 7 days a week for 6 weeks in a row. You just can't. You will collapse, and you will not be any good to yourself. You'll not be any good to your audience. You will not be any good to anyone. So having that ability to communicate and pace yourself, but also pace your team, making sure that they have the ability to disconnect, making sure that they have the ability to take a day off. One of our clients in Kosovo, I thought, had a brilliant way of doing this. They're a TV station, so they're different than most digital models, but they have teams work for 2 days, then they take a day off, they come back for 2 days, and then on the third round, they get 3 days off. And it took them quite a while to work out this way of rotating. They always have someone in the background that can step in case of an emergency. But what is happening is that it's allowing them that day off to really get creative editorially and to disconnect. And sometimes I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I disconnect completely, that's when I'm better at my job, and that's when I get better ideas. So again, very much like Key pointed out at the beginning of this, any crisis and any issues you already have with your organization, the crisis will magnify. This is a marathon, not a sprint, is really critical for you to remember, because again, we have months and months ahead of us on this. And I want to say that this, of course, is critical and applies to your staff, but many of you in this call are the captains of that ship and the pilots of that plane. And you need to do the same. You need to take care of yourself. Maria Ressa from Rappler told us that she was being very, very disciplined about making sure she got sleep. We have another chief editor and founder who told us that every day he has a cutoff time. He goes into the bathroom and exercises with weights because he can't go outside. And at 8 o'clock every day after dinner, he plays Fortnite with his kids because it just takes them away from the four walls in the house and allows him to have that discipline to reconnect with his kids. So these are really, really critical things for you to think about. And I did leave off and I want to say thank you again on behalf of Key and myself, but I left something off in my introduction about MDIF, and forgive me, I got nervous when I started talking. MDIF, in addition to all the cities that I mentioned in Johannesburg and Kuala Lumpur and Jakarta, we also have the South Africa Media Innovation Program Initiative that is obviously based in South Africa. We have the Myanmar Media Program that Tessa, who's on this call, heads up with Jane McKenhorn of Jane is on the call, that supports media innovation in all media, independent media in Myanmar. And currently we have a pilot program that has been launched for Southeast Asia for technical assistance, of which many of you on this call I know are very, very aware of. So if you have any questions, we're going to make this set of slides available to everybody. This is our department email, mas@mdif.org, where Vollar and I are happy to answer any questions. I'm also going to share a link that we have with everybody. We have a folder that we put resources in. It's always a work in progress. I've gotten a lot of great ideas from the fantastic Splice Beta WhatsApp channel that I keep grabbing things. So thank you that I'm still on it. I know that Rashad Alan want us to give up on it, but it's more than a year now that we've been on it every morning. It keeps making us wanting to switch over to Signal, but no, I still go to WhatsApp. So thank you on behalf of all of us at MDIF, and I hope we've not scared you, or maybe just a little bit.
Thank you, Key and Pat. I think, of all the presentations I've seen around, what media needs to do in the time of COVID, I think this is probably the most human of discussions. Thank you for your graciousness in how you're talking about this, but also the empathy and the compassion in which you've described these stories, and also the scenarios that you're painting out. It's obviously a tough situation to be in for many newsrooms. I feel the pain, of this community that we serve. People talk about this stuff all the time, and it just gets everyone down. But the way you described it, at least, offers a sense of hope. I like the scenarios that you're painting. I like the optimism that you're trying to bring into this conversation. So, thank you so much for that. For everyone who's looking for this presentation, you find a link in the chat box there. And also in the chat box, there are a whole bunch of questions now. I'm not sure whether you've had the chance to look at it. Two people asked the same question, Melda, and I think it was, who was it? I think it was Nikhil. They were asking how much working capital should one have in the bank? So basically, how do you go about figuring out your burn rate, and what do you want to keep in reserve?
Well, I'll take that or give that a try. So first and foremost, your working capital is likely not to be the same it was pre-crisis. So if you had a working capital number that covered you for a month and a half or 6 weeks or so, you could expect that your working capital is probably going to be a lot less. And particularly in this crisis scenario with so much uncertainty, ideally you would like working capital to extend you for a number of months. So, and this is part of the exercise in terms of cost cutting and managing cash. You really can't answer in a vacuum what is your ideal working capital. In a crisis, I can tell you it's 2 years, but hopefully, or I don't expect that many businesses are managing their working capital over a 2-year period, because obviously you should be investing in your organization, investing in your mission. But having a buffer of 2 months, if you can create that, or if you have cash that can get you through your critical expenses, your salary, healthcare, any critical needs for being able to keep your signal or broadcasting your artwork or your talents to your audience, having that 2-month buffer is comfortable. And the expectation on when your specific economies will open up, meaning when people are able to get back to work and where there's going to be an influx of cash flow into your respective economies, will give you more insights as to how much working capital is required.
Thank you, Key. I'm going to read out questions. Alan and I will swap between the questions here. We have a question from, I'm just going from the top of the list, guys. I'll represent your questions. Feel free to jump in as well. Pop them into the chat box. Here's a question for Pat. These insights you're sharing are amazing. This comes from Corinne. The biggest learning gaps are in local and regional media. That's where the worst closures are taking place, as we all know. How can we circulate learnings effectively to the grassroots quickly? So in context, Corinne's saying that 80 local or regional newspapers in Australia alone, as we all know, have closed down or suspended operations in the past 6 weeks.
So I loved Corinne's question, and I think one of the things that she was also asking is that it's really difficult to have your team understand how organizations make money. And, this is, I always think that crisis brings out the best in people and the worst in people. And this is the perfect time to understand and to be as transparent, and might be a wonderful time to get your team really engaged in how they can help you move forward. This is not about this crisis, but I remember many, many years ago, a friend of mine was doing consulting with the New Zealand national broadcaster, and they needed to lay off something like 1,000 people. And she was brought in, and it was a really, really tough time. And what she did is she talked to every single employee and said, why don't you come up with solutions that will help the organization save money, and those solutions will help save people's jobs. And you know what? With things like shutting off the lights, not printing paper, little tiny things, they were able to save 400 jobs, which everybody came together. And I think in this particular time, by being as transparent as possible, not only with your members, but also internally, you will find people that will surprise you, that will step up to the plate and will be able to help. I also think it's really important to mention something that I didn't say earlier, and that is there will be some people on your team who will really struggle with performing remotely. And that doesn't mean they're bad employees. It just means that there's some people that do very well in certain scenarios. Listen and offer them help. It doesn't mean that you should fire them. It just means that they might need a little bit of extra help, and make it comfortable so that they can raise their hand and say, I'm struggling. I don't know that I answered Corinne's question perfectly, because I don't think there's a solution for all organizations. Each one is different, but transparency internally and externally and having everybody engaged and cost cutting, to Key's points, I think is critical.
Thank you. There's also, where did it go now? Really great question here about how, who was this from? Someone who went with the name Editorial E. Says, as many subscribers / members are also feeling the financial pinch due to the crisis, how would we go about curating subscription / membership outreach messages without being insensitive? Have any thoughts around that?
So Key, can I answer that?
Yes, please.
Again, you know, I'm not on the front lines. I don't run a media organization. I'm not doing it, so I'm not the expert. But I will tell you that in the work that we've done and that I've been involved with in MDIA for the past couple of years, we've learned so much from people, great people that many of you know, teams from the membership puzzle project. And we've got an expert that works with us, Ranjan Roy, who works with email marketing and newsletters. All of those touch points that you work with. I know Splice Newsroom has a fantastic newsletter that goes out, and it's very personal. It's written in such a voice. Every time that I get a message or an email from an organization that I follow, and they're talking to me, it's a connection. And it is through building that relationship, whether I'm a member or a subscriber. I may be a free newsletter consumer, by the way. But if you're not doing subscriptions right now and you're not doing memberships, boy, is this the time to try and do free memberships, free subscriptions, so you can, to Key's point earlier, data mine those emails and get them together so that when the time comes, maybe you can trigger them. If they are paying subscribers and you do have paying members, whichever one that may be, this is also the time, as I pointed out, maybe the example from El Diario, to reach out and say, you know, can you give $5 extra a year, or 10, or $1 a month, or, you know, whatever that equivalent may be in your country, so that you can, you know, be able to engage them further and make them a part of your success. Bring them in, give them behind the scenes access. I just think it's all about that conversation. Every single one of us as human beings wants to be heard. And if I donate to a media organization and I am then responded to and say, thank you very much, this is what your money has done, and this is what you've made possible, I think that is brilliant, beyond brilliant.
Thank you, Pat. I just wanted to put in a question from Sheila here. Sheila, that was a good one. Sheila's asking about the difference between, have you observed any major difference in terms of COVID-19 impact on small scale media startups and on large media corporates? I like that question.
Patricia, I'll take a stab at this, and it's a very deep question that I have to probe on for a quick second or two. Major impacts on large scale versus startups. So generally, the larger you are, and this is just an assumption, the deeper the larger your cost bar is, and at some point you might have more cash available. But across the board, I found that most of the companies are doing exactly what we're talking about, making cost cuts and creating their crisis plans and forecasting their businesses. For many small startups that have 10, 15 employees, they might find that they have to make 4 or 5 cuts, which is 33% of their workforce. For some of the larger organizations that have 300, 400, 500 individuals, if they cut 20 or 30 people, that's only 10% of their workforce. So to answer on a broader level, I believe that the smaller startups are more exposed, that they're going to be in a situation where their business models and their survival is going to be suspect. Two, that their action plans are going to be a bit more drastic, and how they navigate or how they're able to bring their employee base together will be incredible in terms of, or incredibly important in terms of their survival. I believe that for the smaller startups, their relationships with their cost bar, whether it's their rent or whether it's any other utilities that they require, are going to be incredibly more important to manage. And then many of these small startups have 3 or 4 important relationships from the revenue side. That's probably going to be the difference between survival and sustainability. Making sure that you can find a way to maintain that revenue source in order to continue to survive. If you lose your #1 advertiser, if you're a small startup, that could represent 20% of your revenue line. Whereas the largest advertisers for most larger media companies that are creating crisis plans, it only represents, at worst, I hope, 5 to 7% of their revenue line, their #1 customer. So revenue management and cost management for the smaller startups relative to the bigger, more established companies is going to be a bit more difficult. That's clear.
Yeah, and I think if I can add to what Key just said, there is an opportunity, and I totally agree with everything he said, but I also think there's an opportunity because I always look at the big ones. And by the way, we have some very large media organizations in our portfolio. So this is not a negative or a positive in terms that, as Key very well pointed out, the impact of COVID will be felt very differently, but really across the board in terms of cost cutting and in revenue. But the bigger you are, you're like an aircraft carrier. You know, it's that much more difficult to move that aircraft carrier around, to maneuver it, to stop it. When you're smaller and you're a startup, you're more nimble. You're able to pivot faster. You're a sailboat compared to that aircraft carrier. So there may be some really great opportunities here that you can take advantage of during this crisis that aircraft carrier can't, because anything that they do will have such a massive impact into their organization and maybe their audience and what they're doing. So crisis like this, to Key's point, really provide, I think that we're going to see at the end of this, we're going to be amazed by a lot of you on this call. And we're gonna come asking you to teach us lessons, because you will have come up with new and innovative ways, because you will have turned circles around that aircraft carrier, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. It's a great analogy for being flexible. The other side of it is that an aircraft carrier is much harder to sink.
That's true. That's very true. Okay, I'm positive Key's negative.
I don't know if I want to be painted with the negative.
I'm kidding.
That's fine.
It's also hard to get COVID sailors off aircraft carriers as well, as we found out. Can we go over to Sunny Shui from Frontier? I know Sunny's had a tough couple of weeks. Last week, they put out an email basically to their readers to say, we're in a very tough spot. We are counting on you to help us through this financially. And I believe that Sunny just yesterday or so reached out to his staff and explained some of the changes that he's bringing about to help cut some of these costs. So Sunny, you could spend maybe a couple of minutes to take us through some of the changes that you've brought about.
Yes. Okay. So like first of all, the most important thing that I did was put everyone, make everyone understand and put everybody on the same page, so that, because it's very important that we fight as a team. And then being very transparent about the situation that we are facing and what we will be going through. So what we work as a group, as a team, is that basically cut all the expenses down to skeleton as much as possible, but with the big flexibility, because, like, you know, every department has a different functioning. So and also every individual is different work schedule and duty. So you know, like, make everyone understand. And I went to speak to my landlord saying, like, hey, I can't, you know, you got to give me the discount, and you're going to have to wait for the lockdown period, and then the rent will be behind for 90 days, that sort of thing, you know, trying to negotiate as much as I could. And also my commercial department suffered a lot because everything basically stopped. So they're getting 50% for month of April, and they're going to go on how do you say, leave without pay for month of May. And during that time, we're trying to get, we are trying our best to get more projects happening. I'm sure, you know, everybody's having the same problem. So some people might need PR, a service from the agency. So we are chasing on the other hand. And also, you know, I have this bracket. If your salary is this much, you get 10%. Get this much, you get 25%, and if you're less than 500, you get no cuts. I think what we are trying to do is, we don't believe in sacking people, because it's very important that we have to fight as a team. And so, like, everybody is going to get pay cut apart from the grassroots level, and everybody understand. We suspended our print as of yesterday, so we basically inform all the subscribers that we are temporarily suspending our print, and basically cut on the internet, because we are not at the office. We cut down to half of the bandwidth. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, go as much as I can. And also, but then, like, photographers and people covering COVID, we don't want to, we want them to be happy. So, you know, just very important to make them comfortable and happy and confident. And the way our coverage has changed from, we are doing now only COVID-19. We are focusing online revenue. So we are basically, our agency, the whole agency team now working on our membership promotion. Then aggressively following up with the donors for emergency funding. And it was very challenging past 2 weeks. And I only lost one employee. And on the other hand, I told them that if you want to walk, it's the best time to walk, right? But I lost one employee, but the rest stick with the team. So I'm quite happy where I am now.
Sonny, I'm really excited by the fact that you're able to get full buy-in from your entire workforce and being able to communicate that message. I truly believe that organizations that are able to go from the grassroots member of the organization up to the CEO and the publishers, and are able to hold hands and say that we're going through this, and that everyone knows the story, everyone is in line with the expectation, knows the battle, I think are the organizations that are going to survive the best. So if there is any point, if there's one point in terms of what you were able to describe as being able to get full buy-in from your team, and that we're in this together and not by ourselves, I take that to heart, and I think that is a very successful strategy.
Yeah. that's how we have to fight.
And we all know Sunny. We all know Sunny. If anyone can do it, it's Sunny.
Thank you, Beth.
You know, one of the things that Sunny hasn't told us about his team is that, you know, they've been through a lot of things together. Sunny, these are some of the things we all know about you. You know, some of us that know you, we know about you. Your team has been, some of the people in your team have been with you for 19 years, since the Myanmar Times days. You know, they've stuck through thick and thin for you and with you. You've stuck with them, more importantly. Alan and I have seen how you guys function as a family. You know, this is possibly not unusual, even though it is concerning.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, like, Yangon just started to go into the storm, right? So people are not that serious about what is happening. But I think it's very important for me to inform how serious this crisis is. And basically, I'm trying now. I am okay for next 3 months with the budget cuts, and let's see what happens from after 90 days.
Yeah. I'm just, you know, Alan and I would love, you know, to call on some of you to actually talk about what you're doing in your newsrooms. Sunny, thank you for those insights. I wanted to ask, Padma was out there, Padma of Suno India, if you're in a position to tell us about what you're doing with your journalists with regards to burnout in your newsroom. If you can hear me.
So Suno India is a fairly new platform. We're like probably an year and a half old. And we are a team of 5. And currently we're all working remotely. And what has happened is, I mean, we do have the whole idea of Suno India is also to do more in-depth reporting, but using podcasts as a medium. One of the things that has happened for us because of COVID, and it's come as a double whammy for us because it's come with one of the most stringent lockdowns, you know, that we are facing. I think after China, I mean, even China didn't shut down the entire country, but India basically has locked down the entire country, and it's one of the most stringent ones. What it has also meant is, as independent platforms, we are not even able to go out reporting. So a lot of our reporting is having to rely and coordinate and actually literally innovating using WhatsApp voice notes and reaching out to people through different means. But I think the initial few weeks, as a run up to the lockdown, we were doing quite a few like stories, but I think we were doing it at a usual pace. But since the lockdown, because it has now developed into a more of a humanitarian crisis, especially with rural distress kicking off in India, we've had to ramp up our reporting by reaching out to different freelancers, which also means that we have to pay our freelancers, which meant that our stories which were in production, our other deep dives had to be abruptly shut down. So that became one big problem for us. And even now we're like trying to figure out where do we get these additional funds to support the freelancers. So Suno India, I mean, I pride myself for making sure that our freelancers are paid on time, because I've been a freelancer myself and I hated having to, you know, follow up many number of times. The other thing that has happened is that it also meant that literally now everybody in the team has had to double up as reporters, has had to double up for doing, chasing stories. And I realized that I had started to get burnt out, and I realized that my pressure, I was also, taking my pressure forward to my team. And so we sort of decided that, okay, so I told one of my reporters, you take your off today. And I told my other colleague, you're going to take off after she comes back to work. So we've basically been taking offs in rotation. And I hope, in the near future, I can declare a 3-day break or something. But yeah, it's been pretty tough for us in terms of just even the burnout and constantly thinking about COVID and the stories. And I actually had to tell myself that the whole idea of Suno India was not to do breaking stories anyway, so I should not be so hard on myself. So it's also, talking to my team, telling them that it's okay if you're feeling anxious. I feel the same. And because we were a small team anyway, we have managed to, again, come back into that very bare, skeletal sort of a situation. Some of our hosts for our other shows have agreed to do some episodes where we sort of, where we told them that as and when the revenue comes in, we'll pay you. But is it okay if we don't pay you immediately? And some of them have actually been kind enough to say yes to it. So yeah, that's how we are dealing with it. More through relationships, and just talking to freelancers and begging them to do stories for us and promising that we'll pay them. So yeah.
Thanks for that, Padma. Just looking at the chat box here, we've got some really great comments here. Thank you to everyone who's said such kind words about just all of us trying to make it through this tough time. Chris Lawson wrote to say, if any of the media orgs need any kind of business or tech stories for the website and to insert them into your podcast, feel free to take content from him. That's wonderful. Chris, are you on mic?
I am now.
Wonderful. There we go. Podcaster. Explain your thinking here. What's what's on offer?
Look, people may be struggling with less journalists working, etc. So just happy for anyone to just take any of our content that they need. Doesn't matter how long. If you want to use a whole story or you just want to use part of a story from one of our podcasts, that's totally fine. Just make sure you reference it. And if you have time, send us a link so we can check out what you're doing. But yeah, just more than happy for anyone to use any of our content because we're going to keep publishing. And yeah, there's more stuff in the pipeline. So,
thank you, Chris. I love that. We're getting a lot of questions in the chat about how you keep people motivated. Antoinette asked, you don't have 2 months working capital buffer. You don't have, people that can come to work. You don't have product that you can send out that you used to be able to send out. How do you keep the motivation going? I mean, Alan and I find that we are able to motivate our friends and partners and clients that we work with in newsrooms around this region simply by putting you guys together in this community. And that, thanks to people like Chris offering up his services and his content and his marketing skills to do that with podcasts. Or, I love this comment by King in the chat where he's saying that if any newsrooms need help on data drive reporting or data visualization for better storytelling, happy to help or collaborate. I love that he's saying that, you want, it's amazing that he's offering up these services. Keng, as some of you know, is this wildly talented data guy. And here's my other favorite data guy who's just jumped in, who's saying, to second Keng, my team has also pivoted to support journalists with data journalism. We're already prototyping some tools. This is Jan Oak, who runs this his fledgling organization called TB. These guys are pros all the way through. Get in touch with Jan Oak. He knows what he's doing when it comes to design, data, visualization, and running data teams that support journalists around the world. Alan, is it time for beer?
It is beer o'clock here in Singapore, at least. It's 5:30 p.m. where we are, which is fantastic. I know Europe's just getting going, and unfortunately, you're going to have to choose another kind of beverage while the rest of us hang out over beer like we used to do back in the day. Sunny's already Sunny's already started on his. So if you want, take 2 minutes, 3 minutes, go to the fridge, go pull out something cold or warm. And we'll see you back here in about 3 minutes, and we can just sit and have a chat, and like normal people do. Yeah. I'm gonna go get mine right now.
Take a break.
That's right.
See you in 3-4 minutes.
Absolutely.
We'll be right here.